Welcome, guys, to Parvez's Trade, and my name is Parvez Khan. And on this video, I want to talk about a very interesting leader who has basically been rising through the ranks in the last few years, right? And obviously, I'm talking about Xi Jinping. And I just wanted to talk about what Xi Jinping wants, what his vision is for the future of China, what the future of Yuan looks like, and why mainstream media might not be giving you the right idea of what Chinese future could look like. So, yeah, let's just get to it. So, first of all, for those of you who don't know, Xi Jinping was princeling. His father was a founding member of the Communist Party of China. And then his father had a fallout with Mao, and then his father was sent to the prison. And then Xi Jinping was sent to work in the countryside as a farmer, or as a shepherd, actually. And yeah, then he came back, he worked through the ranks, and eventually got to the top position of Emperor of China, right? President of China, chairman of the Communist Party. Now, when mainstream media talks about Xi Jinping, they talk about how he's a dictator, how he's bad news and all that. But I believe that if you listen closely to what Xi Jinping talks about, it's very obvious to understand what he actually wants. And what Xi Jinping wants is to revitalize China. Okay. It's his version of make China great again, basically. And you have to understand when China is much, much older than most Western countries and most Western empires. Whether obviously it's much older than the USA as a country, but China as an empire, as a superpower, existed multiple times throughout history, whether that was during the Roman times, during the Ottoman times, during the Mongol era, or whether that was during the British Empire, right? China's empire and status as a superpower existed multiple times throughout history, and they went through various and numerous boom and bust cycles. And Xi Jinping wants to basically make China the center of the world again, whether it's in trade, commerce, culture, uh, everything. And the way going about it is basically, look, let's try to understand the Western world if you want to understand China. USA is basically, if you think about what America is, USA, it's basically one of the final remnants of the British Empire, right? USA started as a colony, as a colonial project of the British Empire, and then it grew into its own superpower. But USA, in its current form as a country, is nothing but a final remnant of the great British Empire, right? And the Dutch had their times, the Spanish had their times, the British had their times, and almost all of these European empires colonized America at the same time, including France, right? Mm. But the British power was dominant in America, and so yeah, the American current structure is basically one of the final superpower, great remnants, remaining reminder of the end of the British Empire. Okay, and if you want to compare it to history, it's basically something similar to what Constantinople was, right? You had the Rome, which was burning and falling, and then the capital of Rome was shifted to the east to Constantinople, and that lived on for and staggered on for another 1,000 years. And yeah, Constantinople separated from the Western world, and then the Ottomans came and took over them. And yeah, so America separated from the British Empire, and so if you bring China into that context, China understands very well that when it comes to the Western countries, the okay, first thing first, the Western countries are dying in real time. Okay, and this is not just a metaphorical sense, like literally in terms of population crisis. And countries, people will say, oh, it's not that bad. We can still have kids and reverse the tide. But look, J Japan thought it wasn't that bad. Look at what's happening in Japan. The thing with fertility rate is that once it drops, if you can go back to history about this, more often than not, it doesn't go up. Okay, once the fertility rates drop, more often than not, they don't rise up again. And yeah, so basically, European countries are dying in real time. Okay, they have a fertility rate of around, I believe, one, and the replacement rate is 2.1. And just to give you guys in context, that means that after every generation, the population, at least the European population, not the immigrant population, but the local native European population is getting halved. Okay, when the replacement rate is two, but the population, the fertility rate is one, it basically means that every generation the population is getting halved. So if it was 1 million, if there's 10 million population, it's five after one generation, 20, 30 years, and then again it gets halved. And then, yeah. And so it's not a steady decline in population, in the native population, as most people think. It's actually an exponential decline. Okay? It declines by half, a power of half, right? Every generation. And the truth of the matter is, no matter, I mean, look, every country throughout history goes through three phases. Okay, so when the country first establishes, it starts rising, it's very conservative. The culture is very conservative. And then once the country becomes prosperous, it becomes wealthy, the middle class grows, then people start adopting progressive ideologies. And then once the peak has been reached, and then the country starts declining, which is like inevitable. And then basically you have the country population, the middle class shrinking, the wealth decreasing, currency devaluating, and the culture shifting to a more conservative ideology. And that's basically what you're seeing in Europe and Canada and USA. Okay. And in these final stages of the empire, the culture will shift to extreme right. That's just how it is. And more often than not, the final stages of an empire ends with uh, extremely xenophobic and in many cases communal violence. And look, uh, you can just look through history whether the decline of the Roman Empire, xenophobia increased against the Germanic barbarians, and in the decline of the Ottoman Empire, the xenophobia increased against any non-Muslims inside the Ottoman Empire, like the Armenians, for example, the communal violence, massacre, genocide against the Armenians. And whether it was the end of the Mughal Empire in India, right? That ended with a lot of communal violence between Muslims and Hindus. I mean, British people didn't help. But and then towards the end of the British Empire, whenever the British left their colonies, the white population of British-born citizens that were still living in those colonies, they came under attack from the locals, and then that led to a lot of communal violence. And yeah, look, it's just that's just how it is, right? Every empire, and like just look at UK right now. There's communal violence on the streets of UK right now. Okay, so you're going through the final remnants of an empire, and yeah, so it is what it is. But The question is, how does it end? Well, you just have to go look at history, right? It ends with smaller states, smaller lord and peasant kind of class welfare. And if you try to bring China into that context, China has always existed as a society of where the emperor, look, China never had a Western style democracy. Trying to bring Western style democracy to a country like China, Russia is not going to happen. That doesn't mean that people in China or Russia they suffered throughout history. They lived pretty well as long as their empire was strong, as long as their emperor was rich and strong. Okay, this is the important part that people need to understand. During the prosperous age of China, before the British came and fought the Opium Wars, Chinese emperor was extremely powerful, and China's middle class was extremely rich. Okay, look, you can't sell opium to a population that's broke. You sell drugs to a population that has some money to buy the drugs again and again. And the Chinese middle class was extremely rich, and that's why they were able to get hooked on British opium to begin with. And so when Xi Jinping talks about revitalizing the China's economy, he wants to make China the dominant power in the world, and he wants to make sure China has good relations with the countries that will be dominant power in the next century. And those countries don't are not in the West. Okay. Look, well, people say Trump is just he's a crazy guy. He's another weird American president. This is just how Americans behave. But Trump is basically the symptom, one of the biggest symptom of the bigger problem inside USA, which is that it's in its final stages. Okay, Trump can do all he wants. He can use the military, try to put some threats. And look, you know, like it or hate it, American empire, like I said, every empire, when they go through a decline, they somehow, more often than not, participate in some sort of genocidal, communal violence. America has been bombing the S out of Muslims in Middle East, in Afghanistan, and now they're using Israel, the proxy, to do the same. And people say, oh, okay, there are different ways to look at the situation, whatever. But at the end of the day, the truth of the matter is the ratio of how many Muslims are dying in the Middle East in the last 20 years and counting to the ratio to the number of people that of Western background dying so far. It's like what, 3,000, 300,000 to one. It's a crazy number. Okay. Millions of Muslims are dying and have died so far. And so if you don't think this is a communal violence, a genocidal violence, then it doesn't matter who is right or wrong. But yeah, there's the old saying that one person's terrorist is basically another person's freedom fighter. And yeah, it wasn't a long time ago when the South African black communities were labeled as terrorists by most of the world. Then Nelson Mandela was charged with terrorism. Let's not forget that. Okay, he was charged with terrorism and sent to jail. Okay, so yeah, the reason I'm saying all this is if you are trying to bring China into this context or in the world you're living in, China understands very well that the non-Western countries don't want anything to do with the Western countries. But in reality, they have very few alternatives. I mean, sure, the middle class is shrinking in the Western countries, so now the non-Western countries are trading mostly with themselves and they don't bother too much about Trump's tariffs or European whatever, because there's not a big market to sell there in any way in the future. The big market is in the growing non-Western countries. But other than that, There's no alternative, solid alternative to dollar yet. That's what Xi Jinping is working on. There's no solid alternative to the US military. That's what Xi Jinping is working on. There's no solid alternative leadership to America's bullying around the world. That's what Xi Jinping is working on. And so, if you try to bring Xi Jinping and China into this context, Xi Jinping doesn't want to make the mistake the past Chinese emperors made, which was close themselves off from the rest of the world. Okay? China, being a rich country in the past, they basically stopped exploring the rest of the world. They closed themselves off. And that was a big mistake because as China closed themselves off from the rest of the world was innovating and growing rapidly. And so when the attacks came, it came as a big surprise. And yeah, so Xi Jinping does not want to do that. He wants to make sure China stays up to date with the latest innovative technologies and has a good relationship with the growing leaders countries in the world. And so yes, Xi Jinping has his 2049 plan to basically rejuvenate the Chinese economy and the Chinese culture. And part of the goal is obviously BRICS, and part of the goal is obviously making sure the Chinese military can fight on the same level as American military. That doesn't mean they have to go to war with America. And you know, if you look through history, well, like the reason I mentioned all the about the decline of the Western countries is because when you commit communal violence against any ethnicity, that's sort of the nail in the coffin for you as a country, as a empire. Okay. And like look at USA. I mean, that's the S that USA pulled in the Middle East. The last 20 years, yeah, now they're trying to build relationships with the Arab countries, but they've irreversibly um, turned off any Muslim nation from having a good relation with America in the future by committing these genocides. Just like when the Ottoman Empire genocided the Armenians, the Ottoman Empire turned off any future prospect of a good relationship with Christian Western European countries that were on the rise. And yeah, I think what Israel is doing, it's not just going to look bad on Israel in the future, but obviously it's the final nail in the coffin, in my opinion. Because people are not stupid. This Muslim Arabian countries understands very well what's going on. And in that context, I think they've already decided that the future of the Arabian countries, the Muslim countries, belong with China. And so China wants to make sure that they take advantage of this shift, right? And now the question is, how does it end? And like exactly when will we see the final episode of American Empire, to put it simply? Well, the, when the British Opium War started, the final nail in the coffin for the Chinese empire back then was the steam engine, the steamship that the British introduced to the war. It was whether you talk about how America got their superpower status in World War II, it was the nuclear bomb. Every time a defined uh, shift happens in superpower status, it happens through one country, one empire, one superpower, um, innovating at a scale nowhere near the other country. So, it's like, okay, You have F-15 jets, China builds J-15. You have F-35 jets, China builds similar J-35 jets. Yeah, you're doing similar improvements to each other's military. But if China comes up with an innovative technology that can outpace America's military on a massive exponential level, that American military will be nowhere near. Yeah, that will be the end. And I think they're already working on it. And obviously, they're not going to broadcast what that is. I mean, look, hypersonic missiles, it's a nice thing, but a lot of Western countries already have working models of hypersonic missiles. I think the technology that China will come with, that will be basically an innovative, a massive innovation to outpace any competition from Western countries will be, I think, in the cyber industry. And I know America is good with the cyber industry, cyber security, cyber attacks, but uh, like, look, I think people don't understand just how um, rapidly the cyber industry is growing in the global south and the eastern countries, the Asian countries. Okay. And at the same time, I think Western countries, people don't understand just how dependent they are on a system that's connected to the electricity grid. Okay. You go to a Western country, any country, on a day-to-day basis, you will not be able to live if there was no power, if there was no electricity. It would be impossible, virtually impossible. Uh, but if you're in a country like in the global south or in the East Asia, if there is no electricity, which there isn't in a lot of time, you can still survive. And so the countries in the global south and in the Asia, they are adapted to live without electricity, without this power. But the Western countries are so dependent on this electricity grid. I just don't think the people in the West understand just how dependent they are on electricity. And yeah, I think it wouldn't take much to for China or Russia to place malware inside a software connected to the electricity grid in the West and shut down the entire electricity grid because uh, they're all connected. So you don't have to attack the entire network. You just have to find weakness in a part of the network and spread the malware from there. Then the entire electricity network will get attacked. Okay. And I think the Western countries are not ready for this. Okay. That's my personal take on this. I think that will be something the Western countries cannot replicate and counterattack on China's grid or Russia's electricity grid or anything like that. Uh, yeah, that's just my take on that. I think that cyber industry will be where uh, critical innovation will be made to outpace America's and Western military. And now the question then comes down to the yuan. What does China wants to do with the yuan? Do they want to keep it as a floating currency, back it with gold, silver? Again, you want to look at history, right? And China has been always, throughout history, they have been a big fan of silver. Okay. And Xi Jinping is a big fan of Chinese past. And so my personal belief is that he might go back to connecting the yuan to the silver standard, just because there's such a big supply of silver, and yeah, just because there's such a big supply of silver, And because there's an historical aspect to it, Chinese people use silver throughout history. They have a natural affinity to silver. And yeah, so that's that basically. I think the look, I talked about this in a previous video, which is that if your country is a dominant trading partner for the rest of the world, then it doesn't matter. Sorry. Like the main point about currency market is that if your country is the dominant trading partner for the rest of the world, then your country will eventually have its currency recognized as a reserve currency because it's the most prevalent in the system. The problem right now we have is that you have a system based on SWIFT, which is dominated by US dollar. And so a non-US country trading with another non-US country still has to use the dollar because the SWIFT system is how you do cross-border transaction. I talked about this in a video last night, I believe, and where the SWIFT system is coming under attack from basically XRP, the Ripple system, the crypto chain-based cross-border uh, financing system. So changes are coming, don't get me wrong. And once this US dollar denominated SWIFT system comes down, Yuan will rapidly increase as a adoption as a reserve currency. That's just my take on it. And yeah, so what does the near-term future hold? I mean, what does 2025 look like for China? Well, China had a 2025 plan known as Made in China, which was started by Xi Jinping. And the plan was basically to move China's economy from the low-end manufacturing to the high-end manufacturing by 2025, to move into chips, semiconductors, EVs, batteries, solar panels, to the high-end manufacturing stuff, software, tech. And so by 2025, you'll see more inventions and more innovations in China being released, being published, and that will rival counterparts in USA. Okay. So yeah, 2025 is a big year. Okay. If me personally, I wouldn't bet on the big seven companies in USA next year because all the big seven, and I talked about this in a previous video, the big seven companies next year will face serious competition, serious problems from Trump, who doesn't like most of them, from China, who's going to come up with new releases that will challenge Apple, Amazon. I mean, Apple is already challenged, right? Huawei, they're already on the market. They're challenging Apple in the rest of the world. Amazon already was challenged by numerous online shopping e-commerce industry companies in China. And recently, Temu came out. It's a Chinese e-commerce industry. They're already taking a big chunk of Amazon market share in USA. So you had all these e-commerce companies challenging Amazon in the rest of the world already. And then this new e-commerce company called Temu, they basically came in and now they're challenging Amazon's market share inside USA. Nvidia is being challenged. I know we know Huawei is working on that. And I mean, Tesla, Baidu is already outpacing Tesla. Sorry, not Baidu, I mean BYD, right? And what else? I mean, Microsoft. Yeah, Microsoft is still, it still has some dominance in the operating system, right? But alternatives are coming out, right, from China. That there, I think Microsoft will still has a bit of lead time. And Yeah, Facebook. I mean, Facebook is going through a lot of regulations in Europe. And what else you have? So yeah, basically, I wouldn't bet on the big seven next year as China comes up with more new innovations in the high-tech industry, high manufacturing industry, because they're trying to accomplish Xi Jinping's 2025 Made in China goal. So yeah, next year will be interesting. But keep an eye on that. And yeah, until then, peace.